Hi guys, I'm Ashley. I am the Director of Marketing and Sales at STEM Forge. We're really excited to have you here today. Before I get to introducing everybody, our video today is going to be about video games, some of the misconceptions of video games, and how they can be used as a tool for social emotional learning and applied learning in areas like math and science and all of that fun stuff. So I'm really excited to get to talk about that today with my team. So like I said, my name's Ashley. This is Grant, our founder CEO extraordinaire. This is Cole. He's our director of curriculum. And this is Nick. He is our COO. And all of us are just obsessed with video games and the applied learning that comes with that. So I don't know who wants to get started with the topic, but maybe Grant, you could take it away.
I will. So one of the things that I want to I'll be super upfront. We lean really heavily into the game aspect of everything that we do, right? It's the number one, that's what we use to draw kids' attention. And it's not just because kids like it. I mean, it's something that's been a part of all of our lives for a long time. Our admin team, like we play video games pretty frequently with each other. It's great team building. But I think all of us have had the experience of what games have done for us socially, as well as how games have helped influence our work ethic.
Yeah, absolutely.
As I say, it's generally more stereotypical that kids who are playing a lot of video games, it's almost like the opposite of having a hard work ethic, because they're in recreation, they're not working, they're playing a video game. But really, when you dig into what they're doing, it only takes a small amount of coaching to get them to take the concepts, what they're learning in some of their very complex video games, and translating that into hard work in their school or in future careers. So I wanted to talk just generally about video games as a tool to teach kids maybe something that people don't really think about video games being associated with, or maybe video games being negatively associated with.
Yeah, definitely. I like that idea of like flipping the script on kind of the idea of video games making kids lazy, because I mean, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but the amount of action and hand-eye coordination and even just research that's been done on esports improving attendance, I think that's a huge misconception. So yeah, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think in terms of misconceptions, there's been a general shift in our population recently of people who are kind of past the, all video games are bad, and moving more towards understanding that there's a lot of benefits that come inside with video games. A lot that Ashley had mentioned, but also critical thinking and different social emotional aspects that go inside with that. Like some of my favorite games growing up were puzzle games, and looking back on it, I can see that now that helped develop my mind in terms of a way that was problem solving and doing different things in that aspect of stuff.
Well, yeah, it's really important, like we kind of talked about, to look at what these kids are doing in these games and to really, really, really break it down. Video games aren't quite as simple as they used to be. There's a lot more that goes into it. I'll use like Overwatch as an example, something that we all play. When you step into a situation in Overwatch, there are 100 different things that you need to be immediately aware of and that you need to keep track of. Who's on the enemy team? Where are they at? Is your team behind you? Is your team like ready to go? Who's got ults? I mean,
Who's got all
there's 600 more things that you need to know, and that's all something that kids are keeping track of when they're playing these games. And that's not just Overwatch, that's any game. There's so much that's going on while they're playing.
I think something that you said the other day about your son actually is that he can memorize something that, like, every excruciating detail of something that happened 3 weeks ago in a video game, to like such, like I said, excruciating detail, and really like he's really like conceptualized all these things and has like almost used like really good critical thinking skills probably about this. But if you ask him what he did at school last week, It's like,
Oh, it's a crazy maker as a parent. And I'm sure that a lot of parents who are watching this can agree that sitting and listening to your kid talk about what they've done in a video game when they can't recall what you told them to do maybe 10 minutes ago is super frustrating. But I think the issue there isn't necessarily that it's that they don't have a good attention span, or that, maybe, because my son, he has ADHD, and it's not a matter of it just turns off when he's playing video games. I think that video games they do a better job at using the kid's attention,
keeping them engaged.
And what I've had to do as a parent is, and this is something that a lot of people have found. I know Jane McGonigal talks about it, and a lot of her work. There's a lot of research being done at UC Irvine about how games can help with cognition, and esports in a scholastic setting can really help. But what I've done in our family is I've had to gamify my parenting. So there are small reward systems, there's small currency, there's things that help, that take the positive aspects of gameplay and what games do really well, which is keeping kids engaged, keeping a positive feedback loop based on what they're trying to do, and keeping long-term goals in mind as they achieve smaller ones with small incremental rewards. And so doing that has really helped him with some, I'm not going to get into all the parenting goals that we have, but helped him really come a long way with some of the hurdles that we faced. And it's been awesome. And it's been a great relationship boost between me and my son. And a lot of that has to do with just being able to spend the time playing some video games with it. There's that social aspect, but gamifying things is a huge, huge boost that you can place almost anywhere. The issue is doing it right. And there's a lot of places out there that will, or a lot of curriculum even out there that uses badges and tokens and things, and unless the content, and we've talked about this before in a previous video, but unless it's the interest is already there in some level, you won't be able to use gamification to just smooth over everything. You have to have something, but you have to then gamify it correctly. So, I mean, I could continue to go on, but we have only a limited amount of time.
Next topic.
I wanted to hit on something that Cole had said about how games have evolved, because that's a big element, and a lot of previous research has been done on games in the past. So the idea that games will erode your brain or something, a lot of that is based on passive screen time. So just sitting, playing a very small, a limited game where you're just there, you're on, you ignore everything else, and you kind of go brain dead. Yeah. That's not the case anymore. So, and I know we were talking about action.
So I'll kind of pick it up from there, but expanding on kind of what I said earlier, if we look at the gameplay in these modern games, we can kind of use actions per minute as almost a gauge for that. And actions per minute is just how many things a gamer is doing in that set amount of time. And older games, you have, a few things, you're jumping, you're running. There's not a ton going on screen, but now some studies have shown that we do like 5 actions per second, not just per minute, which translates to a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on.
I don't know if I personally do 5 actions a second.
But that's anything that's an eye movement, that's registering where your target is, that's discerning distance or depth or something like that. And they're doing this. They don't just do it for 1 second, get those 5 actions in, and then like, whoo, all right. They're doing it consistently for hours. And it's stimulating all of these different parts of their brain. They're getting super involved. They're learning. They are, I don't know what the exact terminology is, but they're forming these connections that are allowing them to process information faster as they're playing these games. And it just keeps going, it keeps building.
Well, and you look at, I guess let's take it from the academic perspective. If you look at kids playing modern games, a lot of what they're doing, even young kids who haven't gotten into algebra, let's take Minecraft as an example, because we're all playing a lot of Minecraft.
We all play Minecraft together.
So, for Minecraft, you have recipes, you have to go collect things, you have to gather stuff, but there's an element to Minecraft that is super important that's resource management, and you have to understand the volume, the count of certain resources that you then use to process and create new materials, and then you use those materials to create new tools or new objects that give you added functionality so that you can survive, right?
Yeah.
The kids that play Minecraft that are going in and collecting these resources, they're smelting down materials and they're calculating beforehand how much they need in terms of supplies. And so this resource management that they're doing is algebra. If they know that they need, 10 redstone to make 5 of these blocks that they're going to use to assemble to create a machine, there is so much going on behind the scenes that they've got a plan for the overall structure. They're managing resources and collecting those resources based on the recipes. And the recipes, as you go through different layers, have different amounts. So you may need this amount of material for one thing, but then you need 10 of those things. So you need different materials that you're multiplying to create the resources to build your next item. So there's so much, it's so complex. And so these actions, like Cole was saying, it's not just, I'm not throwing Super Mario under the bus, but it's different than, I have 5 lives and I have to jump over these things.
Yeah, there's applied learning to math.
Yeah, and these are the kinds of skills that we want future leaders to have.
Oh, yeah.
We want supply chain management, professionals to understand. And we have kids that are doing, albeit not to that level, but to some level at 6, 7 years old. And so when we approach kids in middle school with our programs and we're playing esports games where there is some resource management involved, but there's also other elements like team strategy, cost, benefit analysis on certain actions, really quick critical thinking, being adaptive, all of these things, these are great professional skills that they're building, and they're loving every second of it. They are just eating it up.
So that it makes it a really good transition to when you start building those connections and you start learning how to do these different things, and then you go into the real world and you have to start, putting that to a professional setting. It makes that transition so much easier than someone who, hasn't ever touched algebra or, didn't pay attention in algebra or something like that. There's a whole ease of path, I guess, into that where they're developing these connections. And I mean, even when I was growing up, Minecraft was coming out and I even played it then. And it's like, I still have recipes memorized. It's like, why do I still know how to do this?
I know.
Like,
I'm always like, Nick, how do you build this?
And, it's one of those things that it's like, you are so invested in it as a kid because you really enjoy doing it that it then is just ingrained within you forever.
It gets rid of like the hypotheticals that come along with like when you're in a regular math class. And we were talking about this connection to SEL skills as well, is that there's so many of these hypotheticals of like, well, like for math, it's like you have 10 watermelon and you need to do this and this and this. Kind of the same thing about a resource management in like the form of a story math question or a written math question. And it's harder for kids to engage in that because they're like, why do I have 10 watermelon?
Right.
Where instead you can engage them with something like a video game or like Minecraft specifically is what we're currently talking about. And all of a sudden it clicks. Or I had a private lesson with one of my students and, he's really young. And so he hadn't quite gotten into math concepts like that. And all of a sudden we're creating event systems and game design. And I'm like, okay, so if you want this to do this, how many of this do you need? And it's kind of the same exact format as those written math questions, but instead he's like immediately has the answer. He's like, got it. And I'm like, I'm so impressed. And I told him, I was like, you realize that you're doing like math just like on the fly now. And he was like, wow, that's so interesting. Because he's like fifth or fourth grade.
Probably like, don't remind me.
Yeah, like, oh, math.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is that we get them engaged when they don't into stuff like that when they're not even realizing it because they're doing something they already love to do.
Yeah. That's why video games just in general make such a great tool and for teaching things like that.
Yeah.
Well, and this is a good segue, I think, into that SEL. The benefits of that SEL that we can teach through video games is because it's the same thing in other SEL programs. You were saying this yesterday. There are so many hypotheticals that we're trying to teach, like, oh, if
Yeah. Oh man. So that's one thing. I specifically use this example when I'm talking to people because I remember an experience when I was in elementary school and I didn't know at the time. It wasn't like we're having a social emotional learning unit, but it was talking about how you respond, conflict management, those types of things, and everything we were talking about was a hypothetical. And like if your brother comes over and smashes your Legos, what do you do? And then even role play, you will say, oh, okay, they come over and smash my Legos, and little brother, I don't like that you did that. And you coach them through what they should do and how they should respond.
Yeah.
It does not translate in practice. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because as soon as that happens, all of that's out the window. I know this. I have two sons. Legos. And so when we do our esports program, we are not using hypotheticals because I don't believe that they work. I've never seen somebody really follow a hypothetical. What they need to do is practice it. And so when we do esports, we're talking about how you resolve conflict or how you handle loss or how you analyze failure, whether it's yours or your teammates.
Yeah.
But this was something that you and I had a conversation.
Like, you wasted your own.
Yeah, you wasted your own. Yeah. So how you manage that, and then they immediately step into a practice where they're doing it, and doing it is that's what matters.
Yeah.
They don't have to try to think about the lesson that they had at school and then go home and then resolve the issue based on the hypothetical that is just it's gone. It's like a paper wall.
Well, and that's like the basics of early childhood development. Because I have a toddler, and everyone's like, oh, well, play is the best way to learn things. And then why does that all of a sudden end once they go to like school? We're all like, oh yeah, learning through play is the best way for your toddler, best way for your early learner. And then all of a sudden we're like, okay, play is over, but that doesn't stop.
Yeah.
Like play is still the best way, even for us as adults, to really learn things. That's
right.
How else are you gonna do it? You have to talk, you have to work through it, you have to play, you have to not have these hypotheticals, you have to have real life applied situations to really let that sink in, and it will stick better. That's just
and positive association with it as well just helps tenfold in terms of our brains like retaining information, right?
Yeah.
Your brain wants to keep happy memories and it wants to keep positive things and remembering things. Where it's like, school probably doesn't have that connotation all the time, or it doesn't have, sitting down and doing a packet of math problems is not something you're going to try to remember, or your brain's going to want to remember versus, playing a game and having these critical thinking what's happened to you. So, yeah.
The other side of that coin too is applying the knowledge. So let's say somebody is, taught all of what they need to know, algebra, they complete algebra, right? They pass an algebra course, and they step into the real world. How often is it that when, children who have learned Algebra 1 will then see a problem in life and recognize that they're using algebra? I'd argue that it's not as often as it isn't. If that makes sense. That more kids will not recognize that they're applying the concepts that they learned
than the ones who are.
Than they are.
Yeah.
And on the other side of that coin is many of these kids won't recognize that they've been doing this already in a lot of their games.
Yeah.
But if you're teaching them how to do it through play, they're immediately seeing an application, they're drawing those connections, and they can apply their past knowledge to new situations, which is one of the habits of mind.
Yeah, and I think that if you have an instructor who's already super aware of that, which we have really tried to push in our own video game design and esports program specifically, is those applied skills. All of our curriculum says this is what you're going to learn and this is how you can apply it to the real world. And that's fantastic.
And I think one thing too that, I mean, the critical thinking is definitely a huge part of the video game development cycle and like learning things. But something that we haven't touched on as much is the social side of things, where, 20 years ago, games were a lot more single player focused, and it wasn't necessarily something you did with other people unless you had your little brother there with player two or whatever. But nowadays, just about every major game that's being played is a multiplayer game. It's a social interaction, and kids are able to build those friendships and those connections so much easier now, more than ever, through video games themselves. And that's something that we've seen really well with our esports programs, is that it's the kids who might feel more disenfranchised, might not have as, other opportunities for extracurricular, are then invited into this space where they can thrive, where they can have fun, and they can make these acquaintances that have similar interests for them. So it's a huge benefit for them specifically too.
Well, and video games bridge so many different social circles. 90% of the kids play video games. That's a stat that increases as the kids get older too.
Yeah.
But you could have children who generally don't interact with each other, right? Like everybody knows what it was like in middle and high school, where there are cliques, and sometimes these kids don't get along, or they don't, they just aren't familiar with each other because they have different interests, right?
Mhm.
And they're just breaking past that developmental point where they're starting to understand that they can build friendships on more than just shared interests. But sometimes that's really locked in. That's why we have those cliques. And video games gives them a medium to branch out, to be a little bit more vulnerable in a group, to have shared experiences. One of the things that I really have always thought was the one of the best things that we do in our esports program is give everybody a chance to be on a team.
Absolutely.
That is a huge part of, and should be a huge part of everyone's childhood.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the major things that a lot of employers are saying is difficult, especially in a lot of STEM fields where, most people want to just sit down, do their work, submit.
Yeah.
You have to be a team player. You have to be able to work well with others. And giving every child that opportunity is really important. And that's what we do an awesome job of.
Agreed.
And with that, that inclusion is obviously a huge part of all of our programs. And if you look at just the concept of a video game, there's three things that you need. There's video feedback, there's user input, and I should know the third one off the top of my head. Electricity. Yeah. Those are the three things that you need to make a video game. And that user input can come in so many forms. It can be adjusted to any user's needs, anyone that has a specific disability. There are pro esports players that play with one hand, that play like visually. They have technology that can read inputs from the way they move their face and things like that. It's such a fantastic way to get everybody involved in something.
An equitable solution for sure.
Yeah.
Great.
So I wanted to bring up more on the social emotional aspect. There's 5 pillars to social emotional learning.
Mhm.
There's the self-awareness, there's self-management, I haven't written down because I didn't want to, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making, right? Those 5 things, that's what we want these kids to have as they step into their adult lives or young adult lives, into college and career and relationships, and take on leadership roles. We want them to be skilled in all of these things. On our side of I think we funneled those 5 into 3 that we can apply with what we do, and that is teamwork.
Mm-hmm.
There's the growth mindset, and there's diligence. And I think that video games and this gamer mentality, to me, diligence really encapsulates a lot of what people don't understand about gamers. If you get a child who's really invested in a video game, they will work, they'll learn, they'll research, they'll practice, they'll plan, they'll strategize, they'll analyze, they'll do all of these things that if they can apply that, if they can recognize that those are skills they're building and they can translate those skills into the real world, then it's the diligence, it's that consistent discipline and with a purpose. If they can translate that, and so that's where we want these kids to recognize that with their gameplay. That's what we do. That's what I believe makes successful adults.
All of our, that really, like, just that last sentence, like, that's what makes successful adults. Because that's really, at the end of the day, this whole topic is about why do people think that video games make lazy people when really video games make successful adults if you are using it and engaging it in the right way. And so at the end of the day, that's what we do at STEM Forged, is we provide a space where they have equitable access to learn those things and become successful adults for college and careers. Like, period, done. That's what we do.
That's it.
And so I'm really happy that we got to talk about this because it's such a great topic. And, you know, this was inspired by a book that we've been reading, Superbetter by McGonigal. So if you want more information on like this topic specifically, that's really inspiring. I would recommend watching that TED Talk and reading that book because it's excellent. Any of her work is excellent.
Yeah, it is,
But yeah, that's about all I think we have today. Is there anything else you guys want to say to wrap this up? Yeah. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you have a great day. If you want more information on our programs, go ahead and head to our website and we'll have our videos coming for you soon. So thanks. Bye.